Sorry. Chris Packham. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very, very much for coming. Now, before we start, I'm going to do something on behalf of my mother, who's no longer with us, but I feel a debt to her to be gracious. That's the way I was brought up. Now, Mike Clark got a justifiable round of applause this morning, but Mike is here amongst friends. The RSPB, we're all keen supporters of the RSPB. But I would like to ask you to show some gratitude and grace to Andrew Gilruth from the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust and to Amanda Anderson too, for the simple reason that from their point of view they've come into the lion's den. And that, I think, their bravery deserves some applause. A little while ago, Mark and his colleagues went to the Game Fair, and I certainly applauded that. So let's hear it, let's be gracious. Thank you. But for whatever reason they've come, I welcome them here. I want them to hear what we've got to say so they can transfer this message effectively and completely to the people who you might see as our opposition, but certainly some of those people, at least at the moment, are thwarting our endeavours to enjoy a better quality of landscape and the species that live there. Now, it's a real pleasure to be here today and to speak to you, because for once I can speak with a great deal of confidence. You see, I can speak to you because my opinions are formed on scientific fact. Now, I can stand here and say to you that poodles are the best dogs in the world. There are two of them here. I've met them. They're absolutely splendid. It's made my day. I haven't seen a hen harrier, I've seen a poodle. It's pretty good. But there will be other people out here, and they'll have terriers, and they'll have Jack Russells, and they'll have Labradors, and everything else. And you're all going to say, no, Chris, you're wrong. You're wrong. The terrier, the Jack Russell, the Labrador, they're the best dogs in the world, because that's my opinion. My opinion is I think that poodles are just no comparison. So that opinion is largely irrelevant because it's really only pertinent to me and two other people in this audience who have very cleverly bought some poodles to make my day. Better than an ice cream van, Charlie. Is that the voice of the poodle? Not quite. But you see, that opinion is one thing, and we can all argue fervently for our opinions, and we can do it with gusto and passion and energy. But what I like about today is that we're all here to argue a case about which there is no ambiguity. The reason we have gathered is to oppose criminal acts, illegal behaviour. So from my point of view, there's no argument against us. It's a win-win-win-win-win for us. We're not asking for anything other than justice and the implementation of that justice. And the other thing is that we know through scientific fact that with the absence of top-of-the-food chain predators in an environment, that isn't a sustainable, long-term, healthy environment. And we are increasingly sophisticated, and we all are here. I'm going to call you all sophisticated. I might not include myself in that, but whatever. Because our knowledge of the simple principles of ecology tell us that we have to have as complete a community of species as possible to have a healthy community. And if the community isn't healthy, it won't be sustainable. And if it isn't sustainable, it's going to soak up efforts to conserve it, and in the long term, it will fail. And if it fails, we fail. So we need healthy communities. You can't have them without predators. You can't have them without hen harriers. In fact, you can't have them without stoats and foxes and crows. They all have a role to play. The role they play in the management of grouse is arguably a negative one, because they eat the grouse, the foxes, the stoats, the hen harriers, the crows. They do that. But it's an unnatural situation not to have them there. And when they're purged completely from an environment, you're destabilising that environment. And again, this is not an opinion. This is Ladybird Book of Ecology, page 3. So when our opposition stand up and tell us that they are managing these uplands on our behalf, it's a pitiful and laughable thing to do. In the past, we sort of nodded our heads sagely and tapped our caps and wandered away because these landowners knew what they were doing. They had tradition and law behind them. Well, bollocks to that. We've got science. We live in an age, and we live in the UK, where the populations of our birds are the best studied in the world. RSPB, all of you, the volunteers that have worked over the last few years to put the BTO Atlas together, What an outstanding achievement. There's hardly a bird that now breathes in this land that isn't monitored, measured, and known. And this spins out further than birds. You know, we know about our moth population, everything. We have a collective knowledge which is second to none on the planet. So when it comes to understanding our bird populations, no one can compare. Again, there is no argument, there is no ambiguity. The figures are there in front of us. And we know, sadly, that despite all of our efforts, for the last, whether it's the last 20 years, 40 years, 60 years, however long you've been active, the habitats in this country are in decline. 13% of our species are in danger of extinction. We've been trying hard, but I'm afraid to say we've been failing. And that's why we have to try harder, and that's one of the reasons why we're here today. And when I look beyond you and I see that hill, and I see that it's burned, we know that the burning through recently published work is damaging that habitat as a carbon sink. It's having a role to play in global warming. We know that the unpredictability and the extreme weather events are going to increase, so we can only predict that there will be more flooding if our uplands are drained. And this will have an impact not on grouse, and maybe not on us if you're lucky enough to live on a hill, but if you're in Gloucester, then the hills of Wales that drain into the Severn that drains through your city are of consequence to you. And that's what we're beginning to understand, all of us. We're beginning to see the bigger picture, and we won't be blinded by old lies any longer. It can't happen. It's embarrassing when they talk about country folk and town folk. It's something from the Industrial Revolution. It's hundreds of years out of date. Sorry, but we're not yokels. We're educated and informed, and we're backed up by the best scientists and the best data in the land. That's the core of our strength. That's why I can stand here and argue so fervently for this case. It's a belief which comes from what is currently scientific fact. And that is a sound foundation to build the strongest argument upon. But our hen harriers, despite everything I've said, are still being persecuted. So you could argue that given all of that impetus, all of that ability, that arsenal of knowledge and information, that we're still not making progress. Well, we are making progress, because there are more people involved in Hen Harrier Day this year than last, and this is only our second. There are more events taking place countrywide than there were last year, and I think last year's Thunderclap tweets went out to about 2 million people, and this year it's 5. And as you've heard from all parties this morning, our determination is ferocious. So next year it will be 10 million tweets, and there'll be 14 events, and this will be an event which commands even more attention. We're not going to go away, and we're not going away because we're right, and we're going to stand up for being right, and we're going to stand up strong. We stand up strong because our conviction is based upon all of that solid fact. So that's a good thing. Now, unless you were having a holiday on the International Space Station, you will have heard recently about Cecil the lion. Yeah. Cecil the lion. Cecil was a totemic lion. He was a bit of an African hen harrier, if you like. He's a top of the food chain predator. He was enjoyed by large numbers of visitors to Zimbabwe, and he was exquisitely beautiful and much photographed and loved. And very unfortunately, he was the victim of a trophy hunt. I'm telling you stuff you know, of course, but what upset people, I think, more than anything about Cecil was that he was this celebrated figure, charismatic and enigmatic, and that he was lured from the security of his reserve, where he was killed in a really inhumane way, shot with a bow and arrow, and then 40 hours later, after wandering around with an arrow or two, goodness knows, stuck in him, he was finally put out of his misery and then had his head hacked off so that it could be put on the wall, like something from the Middle Ages. Well, Cecil struck a chord globally. You know, what an amazing reaction. And detractors have said it's only because he had a name. What a load of rubbish. Just like the hen harrier, Cecil was a symbol of something far greater. Cecil became a symbol of the fact that the world has become intolerant of this sort of wastage of our wildlife. One of the reasons, I think, for that, personally, I was reflecting upon it last night, is the fact that there's less wildlife generally. Now, there aren't less lions in Africa, and there aren't less hen harriers in Britain solely because of shooting and hunting. There are a tremendous amount of other pressures on our environment. You're well aware of this, and you know what those pressures are. But we've got to the stage now where we can't take this extra pressure of illegal persecution or trophy hunting of animals like that, because those populations of animals are under such rigorous constraints to other problems that they can't take this any longer. So whilst we've modernised our thinking in terms of habitat management and our expectations of the landscape, unfortunately in this instance the shooting fraternity haven't modernised at all. They're still doing what they did in the Victorian age, which was kill anything with teeth and a hooked bill. They're still practising a method of shooting, the driven grouse shooting, which was popular in Edwardian times, which a lot of shooters are embarrassed by now. They think that big bags are vulgar. You know, people who shoot tell me that, you know, they prefer more challenging than standing there, you know, blasting things out of the sky. And they think that people who come in on a corporate day shoot for a day, they're not proper shooters. This is just something for them to do. It's killing for no reason. It's not going out with a pair of dogs that you've trained in the environment and maybe coming back with nothing if you have a bad day. That to me strikes, I'm not sympathising with them, but it strikes more of a chord to what we do. We go out, we wander around, maybe with poodles, and you know, and we see something, and some days we don't. It's an outdated practice. It's no longer viable given all of the other things that we have in the 21st century, and that's why some of us want to put an end to driven grouse shooting. It's too intensive. Too intensive, and the management that is needed for it to be so-called successful means that we can't have a balanced, healthy, sustainable environment. And just to conclude, you know, having said that, I and many of you, I'm sure, are confident standing here today that we're on a firm foundation for success. When I looked yesterday on Google, there were 118 million pages under Cecil the lion. 118 million in the space of less than a month. How many tweets ricocheted around the world about this one animal? As of yesterday morning, Hen Harrier Day 2015 had 239,000 pages. Okay, it's not quite the same number as Cecil, but it will grow, and Hen Harriers will become a focus for that. Because I think they embrace more than just our passion for a bird. It's about injustice. It's about a need to modernise. It's about intolerance of wanton destruction, which is right in front of our eyes, which we no longer can condone at all, given the scientific knowledge that we have. Last year, we had our Hen Harrier Day, and as you've heard, there are 6 pairs breeding in England this year, but 5 males mysteriously disappeared. They're like our Cecils. They kind of mysteriously disappeared. Except I don't really like that phrase, mysteriously disappeared, because again, that's us pandering to being what? Risk averse? Politically incorrect? So as I said last night, let's just cut the crap, shall we? Those birds were shot, poisoned or trapped, and we know it. There's not a person here who's naive enough to believe that that isn't the case. Certainly for a high percentage of them. When we can stop the criminal persecution, we can work hand in hand with these people to go forward. But how can we possibly entertain a relationship with them if they treat us as yokels, spin lies about us forgetting the birds? We don't forget the birds. You know, we just have memories of them if you carry on shooting them, that's all. And when I get here this year, after those 5 birds have been spitefully and vindictively shot, I come back with more energy. I came here last year as a man. This year I'm here with the rage of a lion. You kill 5 more, you're taking on a tyrannosaur.